Hello, I am Michael Omonua. I am a writer and director of The Man Who Cuts Tattoos, and this is the process behind The Man Who Cuts Tattoos. The Man Who Cuts Tattoos is essentially a love story. It's set over two crucial time periods. The first deals with a young lady who has to undergo a painful rites of passage scarification procedure in order for her to attain adulthood and thus be married. The second deals with a modern day couple, focuses on a young lady who questions the emotional pain and distress that her boyfriend is causing her. So we deal with the physical pain and the emotional pain across two different time periods. I want to focus on the village sequences, and I think I'm going to start basically describing part of our Cyril 16 manifesto, which details that we are encouraged to sort of use more local languages and deal with specific sort of Nigerian cultural issues. So I was sort of motivated by the manifesto to sort of focus on a very specific Edo cultural practice, which dealt with scarification. They were known as sort of Iwu scarifications. And sort of my approach was to sort of kind of unpack why those practices were done and detail that in a story of love, pain, and suffering. In terms of my approach, I'm very sort of influenced by Bresson and his sort of disciplined methodology and the simplicity of his style in terms of shot constructions and the use of sort of non-professional actors and understated performances. So I focused mostly just on using one lens during these village scenes, the equivalent of Bresson's sort of 50 on the C300 Mark II. And I had the space to sort of shoot on just the 50 and mostly medium shots. And I encourage my actors to just be as understated as possible in their performances. So there's a scene where my central actor has to undergo scarification or body cuts, and I encouraged her not to be overly dramatic or scream or shout. I just be as understated. The audience will be able to fill in the gaps.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There's a motivation on my part to talk about stories that I feel can't be told anywhere else in the world. So when I set out to make The Man Who Cuts Tattoos, it came from a very sort of specific Edo cultural scarification that was a practice that was done on young couples in order for them to attain adulthood and for them to be married. And I wanted to sort of draw those the parallels between this old cultural scarification ritual to a modern couple who had sort of can't kind of find their way through life and their relationship, whereas in the old days they tend to be guided through different rites of passage procedures. This modern couple are completely lost in their relationship and have nothing to sort of guide them. Sort of ancient rituals have been sort of disposed with and seen as backwards and brutal and something that no one should do anymore. And one of the central plot points in the film deals with my lead character, played by Valerie Dish, who has to now look back to this old scarification ritual to find wisdom from it in order to help guide her through her relationship with America, who's played by Duke Elvis in the film. It's kind of like in the same way you look to a Bible story for guidance, she looks back to this sort of ancient practice for guidance. The two most challenging parts of the film that I feel that we had was to find, one, a location that I felt was authentic, because we didn't have the budget to build an ancient Edo village. So we had to find a village that could be put in that sort of its place. And luckily we found a Fulani commune where these kind of nomadic Fulani people who move around a lot lived. And it was in sort of the outskirts of Lagos. And the second most challenging element that I could foresee in pre-production was the to do a scarification ritual and make it look authentic, make the cuts look authentic. So I was lucky enough to get Hakeem Effects on board the project, and he did an incredible job of just making the scarifications look very real, very authentic, because without that authenticity of the cuts, I don't think I would have been able to actually go ahead and do the film. The research that went into the film, I focused mostly on the design of the cuts and how they actually looked on the body prior to actually getting on set. Once I did get on set, I had a lot of sort of Edo actors around me who guided and helped me, design it properly. So I had the authentic style and the shape and the design of how the cuts were supposed to look like. So it was a team effort to make sure that everything looked real and the style of the cuts were authentic.
But you suppose know why they happen like this now. See, we will just enter clinic. We will find solution to this thing.
But I've been telling you, sir, I'm not going to do that one again.
The modern story is based on a short film called Born that I'd written and directed. And as I was adapting the story of Born to a feature in about 2016, I was also working on another short film called The Man Who Cuts Tattoos, which is about scarification, a rites of passage scarification. And I found that there were parallels in both stories. And it had to do with the pain that two young couples were causing each other. So in The Man Who Cuts Tattoos, it had to do with physical pain. And in the story Born had to do with the emotional pain. So I decided that I had to somehow try and see if I could fit or merge these two stories together. And in so doing, I was able to sort of get the character from Born and the character from The Man Who Cuts Tattoos and have their journeys feel like they were like similar in the sense that they both had to navigate through a lot of pain and suffering in order to be with the person that they wanted to be with in the end. So ultimately, they're both love stories, but they're also stories about pain and suffering in relationships.